Welcome back to Some Guy's Podcast. I am some guy named Guy. I'm your host. I want to start off by thanking you for taking the time out of your day to tune in and listen. So because this podcast is new, I'm going to be experimenting just a little bit, trying out new things. And today I have a special treat for you at the end. So make sure you stick around until the end. But let's get this episode started. I'm going to be talking about Tuna Canyon. Tuna Canyon is a canyon off the Pacific Coast Highway, literally right on the border of Malibu. In fact, where it says now entering Malibu, that sign is literally at the road, Tuna Canyon Road. Unfortunately, the area was hit by the wildfires of California. I haven't been out there, nor have I seen footage, so I don't know if the area that I'm about to talk about is still intact. But it was a big part of my life, and I feel like talking about it today. Let's see here. So, if you've ever seen the show MASH, that show was filmed in the general area that I'm talking about. So when you see the show MASH and you see that landscape, most of this area, which is miles and miles and miles of square miles of land, it looks like that because that's the area that was filmed. A couple popular canyons and well-known canyons in the area would be Temescal Canyon, Topanga Canyon, those canyons there. The specific canyon I'm talking about today is called Tuna Canyon, and there's Tuna Canyon Road, which is, kind of famous. It's a very windy road and a very dangerous road to drive on, especially at high speeds. Now, it's one way, so the start of Tuna Canyon Road is at the top of the hills, and you work your way down to the Pacific Coast Highway. You can't go up it from Pacific Coast Highway. So if you are living in the canyon, as a traveler, as someone that's homeless or whatnot, it's a safe road to go on, and there's not much traffic because the houses at the top, they're really wealthy people that live up there. So there's not much traffic that goes up and down Tuna Canyon Road. But now, even though most of the area is a brushy desert, the canyons themselves, where the hills kind of meet and there's that little valley in between the hills, sometimes there's a little creek or stream that flows down that, which forms little areas that trees can grow. It's a little bit foresty. It's very rare in that area to have trees and forest. Tuna Canyon is one of those areas that does have a decent sized stream and like a creek that does go down it. A little back history of Tuna Canyon. It was during World War II. It was a site where Japanese people, citizens, foreign visitors, tourists, they were put in these like containment camps. And Tuna Canyon was the location of one of these camps that held Japanese people during World War II. There are still some foundations, like there's the foundation of the old shower area. There's a chimney stack that's still in there, but 99.9% of anything that was part of the camp is gone. Now, it is a beautiful canyon, and I lived there for many, many, many years in various tents. And there was a few groups of people up there. There was a couple, Penny and Brian. There was Frank. Frank was unique because he had been up there so long, like since the, 70s or 80s. He actually had a shed that he lugged up there and hid off one of the cliff sides of the road, and he lived in that. The poor guy drank a lot, but he was a fun-loving guy, and, he had been living in there for a while. Now, at the base of the canyon, the next canyon over, I believe Topanga Canyon, there used to be a compound, a neighborhood of abandoned houses. Now, I found some stuff in one of the houses that, because I mean, you'd find like wedding albums, utensils, like all kinds of stuff. But I found some stuff that was a little bit questionable. And the story is that neighborhood got cleaned out and everyone had to move out because they were turning everything to the left of Topanga Canyon into the Los Angeles park. And so everyone had to move out. I think it's a little fishy because normally when people move out, they take their stuff with them. They don't really leave a lot of stuff behind, especially stuff like the stuff I found, which was I don't want to get into it, but there was some photos that I found that were very, very weird. And what with the Hollywood stuff going on and the stories you hear, man, I can't help but think it was an artistic community that was into some pretty crazy stuff. But anyways, it was an abandoned neighborhood. And when I moved into Tuna Canyon, I had a small pup tent to start with, but I worked my way up to a 10-man tent. And basically you would get off the bus, I think it was like the 537 or 573. There was a bus that went from Santa Monica to past Malibu into that area. But the bus stop was literally at the end of Tuna Canyon Road. So you would get off the bus and you could just start walking up Tuna Canyon Road. And the last bus was like at around 7 o'clock. So if you didn't catch the bus by 7, you had to walk several miles. The Tuna Canyon Road is about, I don't know, I want to say 15 miles, 20 miles from Santa Monica. It's not that far. But if you don't catch the last bus out to it, you're stuck in Santa Monica or Venice. But you would walk up it, and about maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles up the road, there was a sharp hairpin turn. And right at the apex of that hairpin turn, there was a trail that went into the woods. And you would go about 50, 60 yards up into it. And over the years, over the decades, various people have set up camps. So there were these spots that other people had camped at from time to time. And what we did is we would have a tent or some shelter that we would put at a spot. Normally, people got invited up there. Now, there's all kinds of tweakers and drug addicts that hang up in there. But not as many you would think. But either way, normally you were invited to be up there. You'd visit someone up there. You got through word of mouth, you found out about this place. And I was invited up there. So I set up an area. I was assigned a little camping spot in the trees. And over the years, I went down to the abandoned neighborhood and I brought things up, such as an AstroTurf mat, furniture, silverware, all kinds of stuff. And so I was living out in Tuna Canyon Road in a 10-man tent with a little AstroTurf front lawn, some garden chairs, things like that. You weren't allowed to have fires there because it was, it's LA. I mean, there's wildfires. So we never really had fires, but we did have like propane or butane stoves and things that we would use. But it was absolutely beautiful. And I really only intended to be there for a few months. Next thing you know, like 5, 6 years had passed. And it was just, man, some of the best times of my life. Like if I could, I would be living in Tuna Canyon to this day. I mean, it was just great. You'd wake up in the morning, you're high up above Pacific Coast Highway, so you don't really hear any traffic. You know, you've got, it's that kind of California deserty, vibe outside of the trees. The trees are really just in the canyon part, but most of the landscape was just hilly, rocky, shrubby, desert region. But man, you had like mountain lions up there. Rattlesnakes would be sunning themselves in the sunny area. So you had to be careful if you were going walking because you might come across a rattlesnake. There were yellow recluse. There was some stuff, but deer, hawks, owls, raccoons, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was beautiful. And the people that were up there, we all got along. So we each had our own little camping area with our own little tent or whatever shelter we set up for ourselves. And each one would be separated by like 50 feet. Penny and Brian, they had this area up on a cliffside that they had leveled out, an area with like a dirt wall. And they had their tent there. But there was also a little spot that wasn't used as a camping spot, but as a community area. And there was one of those white porch tables that was there and a bell hanging from one of the branches. And, you might wake up in the morning, you know, get your pot of coffee going, heat up some water on your butane stove. You'd hear like a hawk in the sky. You'd smell that fresh, kind of mountainous air. Some of the salt air, because if you looked closely if you looked down at the base of the canyon, you could peek out at the ocean. And you might get your cup of coffee and then make your way down to the community area and ring the bell. That way, anyone that was at their spot, if they heard it, they'd know someone was at the community area. And, some people might make their way up to the community area and bring a deck of cards, a tin of rolling tobacco and some papers, maybe a bowl with some weed, maybe roll a joint. And you'd sit there and you'd just be playing cards like hearts and stuff, smoking. Maybe somebody had, a little speaker going with some music. This was starting in around 2005 or 6 that I was there. So just before smartphones, but phones did have like MP3s and you could have like a radio or whatever. But yeah, you'd just be talking, playing cards. Maybe someone made a meal and they'd come up and they'd share it. In total, maybe about 10, 15 people at most were ever there in the area at once. But more often than not, it was like maybe 7 or 8 people. There would be me and my buddy Eli. My buddy Russ was there for a little bit. And then at another spot, you had Penny and Brian with their dog. You had Frank that lived on the drop side of the hairpin turn. I forget the name of this one guy, but he worked at the one of the Venice Beach bike shops. He lived up in there. He had his spot. And then there was this other couple that had the first spot right when you entered into the trail area, into the woods. But we all got along, And at night, you would just hear nothing but the wind from the trees. You might hear some raccoons kind of, scrounging around. And it was just a really nice, peaceful life. If you go to Google Maps and you look up Tuna Canyon Road, California, you got to be careful because there's also Tuna Road or something like that. The Tuna Canyon Road I'm talking about is to the left of Topanga Canyon, and it's right off of the Pacific Coast Highway, right on the Malibu border. So if you're looking on Google Maps and you see Pacific Coast Highway, you see the town line for Malibu, and you see Topanga and Tuna Canyon, that's the road I'm talking about. And what you would do is zoom in satellite view and follow from Pacific Coast Highway up Tuna Canyon Road, and eventually you'll see this obvious hairpin turn. And right at the arch of that hairpin turn, that's where the trail was that went up in there. And man, the memories I have of that place. I mean, there were good times, there was bad times. My friend Eli, he was a bit schizophrenic, so and he always wasted his money on stuff. So he never had money to go to town. So, there's a thing that we would call cabin fever. Basically, you're stuck in the canyon for so long, if you don't have the mentality for it, you kind of start to, kind of lose it a little bit. So we all would go to town every now and then just to get supplies and whatever. But Eli, he always spent his money. He never had money to get the bus out there. And, well, you waste your money, I'm not going to pay for you to go to town. So one day I came back and I was walking up Tuna Canyon Road. The sun was starting to go down. I had taken the last bus. It was dark. And as I'm walking up the road, I'm hearing like the sound of metal scraping on something. And suddenly this flashlight is in my face. I can't see. I'm covering myself. I'm like, what? I can't see, and I hear this whooshing sound, and I don't know what the hell's going on. Come to find out, it was my friend Eli, and he was all pissed off. He's like, "Oh, you left me up here. You always go to town." He was acting all weird and, schizophrenic. I calmed him down. We go up to the camping spot, and he starts going off again. He's talking all kinds of trash, and he pulls out a 12-inch Bowie knife, and he's waving it around. Now, not to sound big-headed, but I can handle myself. And so I went at him with a chair at first, just so, the chair was more of a defensive thing so I could get near him without him slashing me. Eventually, I got a hold of him. I forced him to drop the knife. I got him on the ground. And I'm one of those people, I only fight in defense. And if I get the upper hand, I'll step back, put my hands up and say, "Are you good or do you want to keep going?" Well, I stepped back, put my hands up, but my left hand wasn't going up all the way. And I looked down and I didn't realize it, but he had slashed me on my left wrist so deep that it went down to the bone, and he severed he severed 3 tendons in my left hand. That was, a bad experience. But 99.9% of the experience of the life up there, it was heaven on earth, absolute heaven. Waking up to deer on the hillside, the sound of hawks, the sound of the creek at night, the wind blowing through the trees, and just, it was so peaceful. The sun setting behind the hills or rising at the base of the canyon. I mean, it was, words cannot express it. One of the most magical times of my life. What was supposed to be like 4 months ended up being many years. I mean, we even had we found an RV with an old stove, propane stove / oven in it. We lugged that up. So even though we were living in the canyon in tents and stuff, on the holidays, like Christmas, we were actually cooking like pies and, turkeys in a propane stove, it was nice. And when you're not suffering, when you're not suffering, there's no real urgency to change. I was working the whole time. The creek was there. It's Southern California, so it's warm 90% of the time. So I was able to do laundry and dishes in the creek. We had a solar shower where we had water suspended in the trees in the sunlight. It would warm up during the day. And then as the sun was setting, you could just step underneath it, shower up, or you could just go swimming in the creek. There was an area that we walled off. Further up the trail, there was a little waterfall that fell in, and I'm talking like a foot wide waterfall that was about maybe 10 feet high, that went into this little like pool looking area that fit like maybe 2 people, but it was deep enough to go up to your chest. And there was that. A couple girls that I met in Venice, at drum circles and whatnot, they'd come up and spend a night or 2 up there. Friends that would have guitars would play music. I used to play world drums. I used to make and play djembes, which is like an African hand drum, and especially when you played that on the cliffside and it would just echo throughout the canyon. I mean, oh man, was it so nice and so beautiful. I would go back there and I would be living there now if I could. I can't because of work, family, things like that. And I moved back to Massachusetts, but man, we all have that one point in our life that probably means the most, that probably where you find yourself, and those were the years that you found out who you were. You had good times, you had bad times, and was the biggest influence in your life outside of your family, and that was Tuna for me. What about you? Did you have, while growing up or as an adult, a place where out of all the places that you lived or stayed at or went to, it was one of the defining places in your life, one of the places where It stands out as the place that had the biggest impact on who you are, your philosophy on life, and who you turned out to be. Tell me about it in the comment sections below, or, you know, I'm sure other people want to hear too. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that. Tuna Canyon was a very magical place, and I'll probably talk about it more in more detail in other episodes. But I wanted to get the summary of Tuna Canyon out of the way. Now, it's time for the special treat. So, like I said, I'm going to be experimenting with episodes. It's a relatively new podcast, so I'm trying to find my niche, trying to find my groove, find out what works, what people like, what they don't like. And in today's episode, I'm actually going to finish it off with a song on the topic that I was talking about, Tuna Canyon. It's a song that I wrote and was produced by my studio, Virtual Escape Studio. And I'm going to end the episode with the song about Tuna Canyon that I did. And yeah, so I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your day to tune in. I hope you find my podcast, at least slightly interesting. Please give me some feedback. Do you like the format? Do you like the topics? Do you have any suggestions? Maybe like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell. All that helps. But anyways, we're going to wrap it up for this episode. And again, thank you so much. Words can't express how much I appreciate the fact that you're actually listening right now to my podcast and even listened up to this point. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to let you go. And here's the song, Tuna Canyon, written by me and produced by my studio, Virtual Escape Studio. I hope you like it. Enjoy. And I'll see you next time on Some Guy's Podcast. I'm some guy named Guy.
We pitched our home on shaky ground, trying to get lost and never found. Hand-rolled smokes in the setting sun. In Tuna Canyon we come undone. Cards dealt under the open sky, laughing till we're drunk and high. The coyotes watching the creek flow slow. In these woods we got nowhere to go. Living free, the vibe is right. Stars above our roof each night. In Tuna Canyon, wild and free, bound by the trees, and there's nowhere to be. Dirty jokes and a Ruskin tune, telling our stories neath the waxing moon. Guy tells a tale so tall. In this canyon we've got it all. Pacific coast around Malibu Way, echoes of freedom fill our days. Friends with friends, we find our way. In Tuna Canyon, come what may. Living free, the vibe is right. Stars above our